Right now, you are lying somewhere comfortable, maybe in bed, maybe on a couch. The lights are low, and you are looking for something to help your mind slow down. So let me take you somewhere. About 60,000 years ago, in a cave in what is now southern France, a Neanderthal is waking up. Not a caveman, not a brute, a person. A mother, actually, and she's about to start a day that would break most of us. Tonight, we are going to live that day with her, from the moment she opens her eyes in the cold dark of the cave to the moment she falls asleep by the fire. And then we are going to live her whole life, birth to death, everything in between. And I promise you, by the end of this, you will never think of Neanderthals the same way again. This is what a Neanderthal's life was actually like. Every detail grounded in science, every moment as real as we can make it. Let us begin. Her name, well, she did not have a name the way we think of names, but she had a sound, a short guttural call the others used for her, something between a hum and a bark. For tonight, though, let us just call her the Mother. She's about 28 years old, which in Neanderthal terms makes her solidly middle-aged. She has already lived longer than many in her group ever will. Her body tells the story of those years. There is a healed fracture on her left forearm from a hunting accident when she was 19. Her right knee aches when the weather turns cold, which it does often here in Ice Age Europe. Her teeth are worn down from years of using them as tools, gripping hides to soften them, holding sinew while she works. But she is strong, unbelievably strong by our standards. If you shook her hand, you would feel the difference immediately. Her grip would be crushing. Her forearms are thick with muscle, her shoulders broad, her frame compact and dense with power. She weighs about 150 pounds, nearly all of it bone and muscle, and she stands about 5'3", shorter than the average modern woman, but built like a gymnast crossed with a powerlifter. If you are using this to fall asleep, that is kind of the whole point, so maybe hit subscribe if you have not already. Tell me where you are listening from in the comments too. I love seeing the mix. Last video had someone from São Paulo and someone from a fishing village in Norway on the same night. Anyway, let us get back to our Neanderthal. The cave where she sleeps is not some cramped hole in a rock. It is actually a large limestone overhang, what geologists call a rock shelter, with a wide mouth that faces south to catch whatever warmth the pale sun offers. The ceiling is high enough to stand under, at least near the entrance, and the space goes back maybe 40 feet into the hillside, narrowing as it goes until the back wall curves down to meet the floor. The entrance is maybe 25 feet wide, and on cold nights, which is most nights, they hang heavy bison hides across parts of it to block the wind. It is not a mansion, but it is home. It has been home for generations. The walls are dark with the soot of 10,000 fires. The floor is packed earth, tamped down by decades of feet, layered with old ash and bone fragments and the occasional lost flake of flint. There are sleeping areas near the back, lined with animal furs and dried grasses, and there is the main fire pit near the centre, a shallow depression ringed with stones where the coals are kept alive through the night. And that is where our story really starts, with those coals. The mother opens her eyes. It is still dark outside, or mostly dark. There is that thin grey light that comes just before dawn in winter, that almost light that makes everything look like a charcoal drawing. The air inside the cave is cold, not freezing, not with the residual warmth from the fire and the body heat of the others, but cold enough that her breath makes a faint mist. She can see the coals glowing in the fire pit, orange and sullen under a layer of ash. Someone banked them well last night. That was probably old Carr, the eldest male, who has trouble sleeping and tends to fuss with the fire in the small hours. She lies still for a moment, just breathing. Around her, the others are still asleep. There are about 15 of them in this group, though the number shifts with the seasons. Her 2 children are pressed against her, one on each side. The older one, a boy of about 7, is curled into a tight ball with his thumb near his mouth. The younger one, a girl of about 3, is sprawled across the mother's chest with the absolute boneless abandon that only small children can manage. The mother does not want to move. Not yet. This is the warmest she will be all day, buried under bison hide with her children's small furnace bodies pressed against her. But something is pulling her toward wakefulness. Something beyond the growing light. There is a sound outside the cave. Not close, not dangerous, but present. The low, resonant call of a woolly mammoth somewhere in the valley below. It is a sound she has heard her entire life, as familiar as birdsong would be to you. But today it means something specific. It means the herds are moving through the valley, and where mammoths go, other animals follow. Where other animals go, there is food. She sits up slowly, carefully extracting herself from the tangle of children and furs. The little girl murmurs and reaches for her but does not wake. The boy does not stir at all. She moves to the fire pit, crouching low, and begins to work the coals. This is an art, and she is good at it. She pushes aside the top layer of ash with a flat stone, exposing the brighter coals beneath. Then she feeds them carefully, first with dried moss, then with small twigs, then with progressively larger sticks. She blows gently, steadily, angling her breath across the coals the way her mother taught her, the way her mother's mother taught her mother. The fire catches. It always feels like a small miracle. That moment when the first real flame appears, orange and flickering and alive. She feeds it more wood, building it up until the heat pushes back the morning chill. Other people are starting to stir now, drawn by the warmth and the crackle. Here is something that might surprise you. The social structure inside this cave is not what the old textbooks told you. There is no chest-thumping alpha male ruling through brute force. Neanderthal groups, as far as we can tell from the archaeological evidence, were remarkably egalitarian. The mother is not subservient to anyone. She is one of the most important members of this group, and everyone knows it. She is a skilled hunter, yes, but more than that, she is a problem solver, a decision maker, someone whose judgment the others trust. Genetic analysis of Neanderthal groups tells us something fascinating. The males in a group tended to be closely related to each other, brothers, cousins, fathers and sons, while the females often came from outside the group. This means that at some point, probably as a teenager, our mother left the group she was born into and joined this one. She chose this group, or was welcomed into it, and she made it her own. Think about that for a second. She walked away from everyone she had ever known and started over with strangers. That takes a particular kind of courage, or maybe desperation. We will never know which. But she is here now, and she has been here for over a decade, and this is her family as surely as if she had been born to it. The fire is burning well now, and the cave is slowly filling with warmth and the smell of wood smoke. Some of the others have gathered near the fire. There is old Carr, who, as I mentioned, is the eldest, probably around 40, which is genuinely old for a Neanderthal. He moves stiffly, his joints swollen with arthritis, his spine curved from years of hard living. But his eyes are sharp, and his mind is sharper. He is the one who remembers where the best flint outcrops are, which valleys flood in spring, where the deer herds cross the river at certain times of year. He is a living library, and the group cannot afford to lose him. There is a younger male, strongly built, maybe 19 or 20, who is probably the mother's mate, though Neanderthal pair bonding is something we do not fully understand. There are 2 other adult females, one of whom is heavily pregnant. There are several children of various ages, and there is one individual who is particularly interesting to us, a male of about 30 who is missing most of his right arm. It was lost years ago, probably in a hunting accident, and the bone shows signs of having been carefully tended. Someone amputated the damaged limb, controlled the bleeding, dressed the wound, and nursed him through weeks or months of recovery. He has been living with this disability for years, and he is still part of the group. He still eats. He still sleeps by the fire. He still matters. And this tells us something profound about Neanderthals, something that demolishes the old stereotype of mindless brutes. They cared for each other, not just casually, not just when it was convenient, but deeply and at significant cost. Keeping a one-armed man alive in the Ice Age means feeding him when food is scarce. It means protecting him when danger comes. It means valuing his life beyond his immediate usefulness. This is not something animals do. This is something people do. Now, breakfast. And here is the thing. Neanderthals were not just gnawing on raw meat like the movies show you. The mother reaches for a collection of stones near the fire, flat ones that have been heating in the coals. She uses 2 sticks to pull them out and sets them on a cleared patch of ground. Then she takes strips of dried meat, deer from a kill 3 days ago, and lays them on the hot stones. The meat sizzles and spits. She also has a collection of marrow bones that she cracks open with a hammerstone, and she roasts the exposed marrow directly in the fire. Bone marrow, by the way, is one of the most calorie-dense foods available in the Ice Age world. It is essentially nature's butter, rich in fat and nutrients, and Neanderthals ate enormous quantities of it. Chemical analysis of their bones shows that their diet was overwhelmingly meat-based, comparable to the diet of a wolf or a lion. They were apex predators in the truest sense, but it was not only meat. We know from microscopic analysis of Neanderthal dental plaque, yes, scientists have analysed 60,000-year-old plaque, that they also ate plants, cooked plants. At the cave site of El Sidrón in Spain, researchers found evidence of cooked starchy plants, likely some form of wild grain or tuber, in Neanderthal teeth. They also found traces of chamomile and yarrow, plants with essentially no nutritional value but significant medicinal properties. But we will get to that later. For now, the mother distributes food to the children. The 7-year-old eats enthusiastically, tearing at the dried meat with his strong teeth. The 3-year-old is pickier, more interested in the rich, soft marrow which the mother scoops out for her with a finger. The old man Carr eats slowly, methodically, his worn teeth struggling with the tougher pieces. The pregnant woman eats more than anyone, her body demanding fuel for the life growing inside her. And the one-armed man eats what he is given, and nobody begrudges him a single bite. But here is what nobody talks about. What did they do between meals? What happened in the quiet hours? Because there were quiet hours. We tend to imagine prehistoric life as a non-stop survival struggle, every moment dedicated to not dying. But that is not quite right. Studies of modern hunter-gatherers suggest that they typically spend only about 4 to 6 hours a day on subsistence activities, hunting, gathering, processing food. The rest of the time is spent on social activities, crafting, resting, and yes, what we might loosely call leisure. Neanderthals likely had a similar pattern. So after breakfast, as the morning light strengthens, the cave enters a period of what you might call purposeful calm. Some people are working on tools, some are processing hides, some are simply sitting by the fire talking, and yes, they talked. We will get deeper into that later, but for now, know that the old idea that Neanderthals could not speak has been thoroughly debunked. They had the same FOXP2 gene associated with speech in modern humans. They had hyoid bones, the small bone in the throat that supports the tongue for speech, that were virtually identical to ours. Their ear canals were tuned to the same frequencies as modern human speech. They could talk. They did talk. And right now, in the growing light of a winter morning in Ice Age France, they are talking. The mother is having a conversation with one of the other women about the mammoth calls they heard at dawn. It is not a language the way you and I would recognize it. It is simpler, probably, with a smaller vocabulary, more dependent on gesture and context and shared understanding. But it is language. It conveys meaning. It coordinates action. It connects minds. And right now, it is being used to make a plan. The mammoths in the valley mean other animals are on the move too. Deer, probably. Maybe horses. The group has not had a major kill in days, and while they have stored and dried meat, the supply is getting low. Today might be a good day to hunt. But before we get to the hunt, let me slow down and tell you more about what an ordinary morning looks like in this cave, because the quiet moments are just as important as the dramatic ones, and honestly, they tell us more about who these people really were. While the adults discuss the hunt, the children are doing what children always do. They are making a mess. The 7-year-old has found a piece of charcoal from the edge of the fire pit and is drawing on the cave wall with it. Nothing sophisticated, just lines and squiggles. But the impulse is there. The impulse to make a mark, to leave a trace, to say I was here. His 3-year-old sister is watching him with intense concentration, and when he puts the charcoal down, she picks it up and tries to copy what he did. She cannot manage it yet. Her coordination is not quite there, but she tries. And nobody stops them. Nobody tells them to stop wasting time or making a mess. Because play is learning, and Neanderthal adults seem to have understood that instinctively. Meanwhile, 2 of the women have left the cave to fetch water. The stream is about a 10-minute walk down the hillside, a clear, cold flow that comes out of a limestone spring and runs down to the river in the valley. They carry water in containers made from animal stomachs or bladders, tough, flexible, natural vessels that can hold several litres each. Getting water is not glamorous work, but it is essential, and it is also social. The 2 women walk together, talking, keeping watch for predators, helping each other navigate the rocky slope. Every task in a Neanderthal's day is a shared task. Solitude is rare and usually unwanted. On the way back from the stream, one of the women stops to gather something. It is a clump of dried grass, the tough, fibrous kind that grows on the exposed hillside. She pulls it up by the roots, shakes off the dirt, and tucks it under her arm. This grass will be used as tinder for future fires, or as insulation in the sleeping areas, or as padding inside makeshift footwear. Nothing in the Neanderthal world is single-purpose. Everything has multiple uses, and a good forager keeps an eye out for useful materials the way you might keep an eye out for a sale on something you need. The morning light has fully arrived now, and the cave takes on a different character. In the daylight you can see things that the firelight hid. The walls are not just dark with soot. They are textured with layers of occupation, different colours of ash and sediment that represent different periods of use. In some places the limestone has been smoothed by generations of shoulders and backs leaning against it. In others there are scratches and marks that might be intentional, or might just be the result of tools being sharpened against the rock. The floor is a complex landscape of its own. Near the fire pit there are scattered flint flakes, the debris from tool-making sessions past. There are bone fragments, cracked and discarded after the marrow was extracted. There are small piles of processed material, bundles of dried sinew, lumps of birch bark tar wrapped in leaves, collections of particularly good stones set aside for future use. The cave is not just a shelter, it is a workshop, a kitchen, a nursery, a hospital, and a home. And every surface tells a story about the people who live here. There is a spot near the left wall where the mother usually sits to work on tools. The ground there is thick with flint debris, the accumulated waste of hundreds of napping sessions. There is a flattened area near the back where the pregnant woman has been resting more and more as her time approaches. There is a worn groove in the rock near the entrance where someone, probably several someones over many years, has sat and sharpened spear points against the stone. These are the marks of daily life, unremarkable in the moment, invisible to the people who made them, but preserved in the archaeological record for 60,000 years. Every scrape and smudge and discarded flake is a sentence in a story about how these people lived. And here is something I think about a lot. The Neanderthals did not know they were Neanderthals. They did not know they were a different species. They did not know that strange, tall, thin people were slowly making their way out of Africa and would one day replace them across all of Europe and Asia. They just knew this cave, this valley, these people, this fire. The rhythm of the seasons, the movement of the herds, the feel of good flint under the hammerstone, the weight of a sleeping child on your chest. That was the whole world, and in a way, it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Let me paint you a picture of what the landscape looks like from the mouth of this cave, because it is genuinely breathtaking, even by Ice Age standards. The cave sits about halfway up a limestone cliff, maybe 100 feet above the valley floor. From the entrance, you can see for miles. The valley stretches east to west, carved by the river over millions of years. The river itself is wider and faster than anything you would see in the same spot today, fed by glacial meltwater and seasonal rains. Its banks are lined with willows and alders, and in the shallows, you might see the dark shapes of salmon fighting their way upstream. Beyond the river, the land rises in a series of rolling hills covered with a mix of grassland and scattered trees, mostly pine, birch, and juniper. In spring, these hillsides are dotted with wildflowers, crocuses and gentians, and the tiny white stars of wood anemones. In autumn, the birches turn gold and the grass turns brown, and the whole landscape looks like it has been painted with a palette of earth tones. In winter, which is the longest season and the hardest, snow covers everything, and the world becomes a study in white and grey, with the dark lines of bare trees and the darker lines of exposed rock. It is cold. Properly, seriously cold. Average winter temperatures in Ice Age. France were probably 10 to 15 degrees Celsius lower than they are today. That does not sound like much until you remember that there is no central heating, no insulated clothing, no thermos of hot coffee. The cold is a constant companion, a persistent drain on energy and morale, a thing that must be actively fought every single day from autumn to spring, and the mother has been fighting it her entire life. She knows cold the way a sailor knows the sea. She respects it, she prepares for it, she never underestimates it. She knows that wet cold is more dangerous than dry cold. She knows that wind makes everything worse, She knows that a good fire and a warm body pressed against yours can be the difference between waking up and not waking up. This knowledge is not abstract for her. It is visceral, earned through experience, burned into her memory by nights when the cold came close, when a child shivered too hard, when an elder's lips turned blue. Now let me take you back in time, even further back, because to understand who this woman is you need to understand where she came from, and her childhood, well, it is one of the most fascinating things about Neanderthal life. Let us go back 25 years to this same region, but a different cave, a different group. The mother is being born. Neanderthal birth was, as far as we can tell, even more difficult than modern human birth. A modern human birth is already one of the most dangerous things that routinely happens to our species. The Neanderthal skull was slightly different from ours, wider from side to side with a more elongated shape from front to back. The Neanderthal pelvis was also slightly different, wider in some dimensions, and the birth canal had a different shape. Computer simulations of Neanderthal birth suggest that the baby had to rotate during delivery, just like modern human babies, which means the process was complicated enough that the mother almost certainly needed help. Birth among Neanderthals was probably a social event, with other women assisting. The baby, our future mother, came into the world sometime in late autumn. She was small, as all newborns are, but she was Neanderthal small, which still meant she was robust by modern infant standards. Her bones were already denser than a modern baby's. Her muscle attachments were already more pronounced. She was built for a hard world, and that hardness was written into her body from the very first day. Her own mother held her close, skin to skin, the way human mothers have held their babies for millions of years. Warmth is survival for a newborn, especially in the Ice Age, and Neanderthal mothers nursed frequently and kept their infants in near constant physical contact. There were no cradles, no cribs, no separate sleeping spaces. The baby slept where the mother slept, ate when the mother offered, and was carried everywhere the mother went. Isotopic analysis of Neanderthal teeth, and this is genuinely remarkable science, has allowed researchers to determine when Neanderthal children were weaned. The answer is around 3 to 4 years old, which is similar to many modern hunter-gatherer societies, and much later than most people in the modern Western world wean their children. This extended nursing period served multiple purposes. Breast milk provided crucial nutrition and immune support. The physical closeness strengthened the bond between mother and child, and the hormonal effects of nursing likely suppressed ovulation, acting as a natural form of birth spacing that prevented the mother from becoming pregnant again too quickly. So for the first 3 or 4 years of her life, our future mother was essentially glued to her own mother. She was carried on the hip during foraging trips. She was held close during cold nights. She was nursed when she was hungry, comforted when she cried, and surrounded at all times by the sounds and smells and warmth of her family group, and she was learning. This is something that does not get enough attention when people talk about Neanderthals. Their children were learning constantly, absorbing information about the world through observation in a way that would put any modern preschool to shame. By the time she was 2, she could recognize every member of her group by sight, sound, and probably smell. She knew the difference between the call that meant danger and the call that meant food. She could identify edible plants, not by being taught in any formal way, but simply by watching what the adults ate and imitating them. By 3, she was beginning to play in ways that were actually practice for adult skills. She picked up stones and banged them together, mimicking the toolmakers. She dragged sticks around the cave, pretending to carry spears. She played with the other children in rough physical games that built the strength and coordination she would need as an adult. Here is something that might give you a new perspective on Neanderthal childhood. We tend to imagine it as this grim survival boot camp, every waking moment dedicated to learning how to not die. But that is not how children work. Children play. It is what they do. It is what they have always done, across every species of human that has ever existed. And Neanderthal children played. They played with stones, stacking them and knocking them down. They played with sticks, sword fighting and jousting and pretending to be the great hunters they admired. They played with water, splashing in the stream on warm days, floating leaves like tiny boats. They played with fire, poking sticks into the coals and watching the tips glow orange, blowing on them to make sparks, getting scolded by their mothers and doing it again 5 minutes later. They played with animals too, or at least with parts of animals. Teeth and bones and antlers became toys. things to be collected and compared and traded and treasured. A particularly interesting stone, one with an unusual colour or a naturally smooth surface, might become a prized possession, carried everywhere, slept with, shown to anyone who would look at it. Children collecting interesting rocks. Some things truly never change, and they got hurt. Of course they got hurt. Childhood injuries are visible in the fossil record, healed fractures in small bones, evidence of infections that were survived. Our future mother probably got her share of scrapes and bruises and minor breaks, and every time she did, someone cared for her. Someone cleaned the wound. Someone held her while she cried. Someone made her feel safe again. That is what childhood is, at its core, no matter when or where it happens. A slow, sometimes painful process of learning about the world while being protected by people who have already learned its lessons the hard way. By the age of 5 or 6, she was starting to understand something important: death. Not as an abstract concept, but as a reality. In a Neanderthal group of 15 people, death visited regularly. A child who died of illness in winter, an adult who did not come back from the hunt, an elder who simply stopped breathing one night. Death was not hidden from children. They saw it. They felt its aftermath. The grief in the adults, the empty space by the fire, the name that was no longer called. And somehow, from this early exposure to the hardest truth of all, they learned not fear but something closer to acceptance. A practical understanding that life is finite and precious, and not to be wasted. That every day above ground is a gift. That the people around you matter more than anything, because they are all you have, and someday they will be gone. Later, we're going to see what happens when she goes on her first hunt, and honestly, it is one of the most incredible things I have ever researched. But first, let us stay with her childhood a little longer. Between the ages of 4 and 8, she entered what we might call the apprenticeship period. She was no longer nursing, no longer carried everywhere, but she was still too young to participate in serious adult activities like hunting large game. Instead, she spent these years in a kind of extended training program, learning the skills she would need to survive. She learned to make fire. This was not a simple skill. Making fire from scratch, without matches or lighters or any of the tools we take for granted, requires specific knowledge of materials, technique, and patience. You need the right kind of wood for the friction method, or the right kind of iron pyrite to strike against flint. You need tinder, properly dried and prepared. You need to understand airflow, how to feed a tiny ember without smothering it or blowing it out. A Neanderthal child learning to make fire was learning physics, materials science, and fine motor control all at once. She learned to identify and process plants. Even though Neanderthals were primarily meat-eaters, plant knowledge was crucial. She needed to know which plants were edible, which were poisonous, which had medicinal properties, and where and when they could be found. This was botanical knowledge accumulated over thousands of generations and passed down through observation and imitation. She learned to work with animal hides. Processing a raw animal's skin into usable leather is a multi-step, multi-day process that requires specific tools and techniques. You have to scrape off the fat and flesh. You have to stretch and dry the skin. You may need to smoke it or treat it with brain matter, which contains natural tanning agents, to make it supple and water-resistant. This was women's work, as far as we can tell, though the gendered division of labour among Neanderthals was probably less rigid than in many later human societies. And she learned to read the landscape. This is perhaps the most underappreciated skill of all. A Neanderthal who could look at a hillside and know where water would collect after rain, who could read animal tracks in the mud and know not just what animal had passed but how long ago and how fast it was moving, who could navigate through dense forest and across open tundra without getting lost, possessed a kind of environmental intelligence that most modern humans have completely lost. By the time she was 8 or 9, she was beginning to participate in the group's subsistence activities in a real way. She joined the women on gathering trips. She helped butcher kills that the hunters brought back. She carried water from the stream in animal skin containers. She was becoming, in every practical sense, a contributing member of her community. And then, somewhere around the age of 12 or 13, she reached puberty. Neanderthals matured slightly faster than modern humans. Analysis of dental growth lines and bone development suggests that their childhood was compressed compared to ours, that they reached physical maturity perhaps 2 or 3 years earlier than we do. By 13, she was nearly full grown. By 15, she was an adult in every meaningful sense, and sometime around 15 or 16 she left her birth group. We do not know exactly how this happened. Maybe she encountered males from another group during a seasonal gathering. Maybe she wandered further than usual on a foraging trip and found herself in another group's territory. Maybe there was some kind of exchange, a tradition of young women moving between groups to prevent inbreeding, which the genetic evidence strongly supports. However it happened, she left. She walked away from the cave where she had been born, from the mother who had nursed her and carried her, from the children she had played with and the elders who had taught her, and she joined a new group of people who were, at that moment, strangers. Think about the courage that took, or the necessity. She was maybe 15 or 16 years old, already physically mature but still young, still learning, still becoming who she would be. And she left everything she knew and walked into the unknown. The journey itself might have taken days. She would have crossed valleys and hills and rivers, sleeping alone or with a small travelling group, eating what she could find or carry, always watching for predators, always moving towards something she could not yet see. Cave lions roamed this landscape. Wolves hunted in packs. Cave hyenas, bigger and more aggressive than modern hyenas, lurked near carcasses and were not above attacking a lone traveller. Making this journey alone would have been an act of extraordinary bravery. Making it with others, perhaps as part of a seasonal meeting between groups, would have been safer but no less daunting. Either way, she arrived. She came to a new cave in a new valley with new people who looked at her with curiosity and maybe caution, and maybe welcome. And the process of becoming part of the group would have been gradual. She would have had to prove herself. She would have had to learn the new group's routines, their preferred hunting grounds, their water sources, their tool-making traditions, which might have been slightly different from what she was used to. She would have had to build relationships from scratch, earning trust through competence and reliability, and the slow accumulation of shared experience. The first weeks must have been lonely. She did not know the sounds they used for things. She did not know the in-jokes, the shared memories, the unspoken rules that every group develops over time. She was an outsider, and in a group of 15 people who have known each other their entire lives, an outsider stands out. But Neanderthals needed outside females. Their genetics required it. Inbreeding was a real and constant danger in small isolated populations, and the influx of new genetic material through female migration was one of the main mechanisms that kept groups viable. So she was welcomed, eventually. She found a place by the fire, she learned the new routines, she began to contribute, to hunt and forage and make tools alongside people who were becoming, slowly but surely, her people, and she found a mate. We do not know how Neanderthal pair bonding worked exactly. Was it lifelong, seasonal, flexible? The fossil record does not tell us. But at some point she and one of the young males in the group began sleeping near each other, began sharing food with particular attention, began the quiet, ancient dance of partnership that our species has been performing in one form or another for millions of years. And then, when she was about 19, her first child was born, a boy, and everything changed. Suddenly she was not the newcomer anymore. She was a mother. She had roots here now, deep roots, living roots, a child who belonged to this group as surely as the cave itself. And the fierce protective love that flooded through her, the love that would drive every decision she made for the rest of her life, connected her to this place and these people in a way that nothing else could have. And somehow, over the following months and years, she made them family. That is where we find her now, 12 years later, a mother herself, a central figure in a group that needs her as much as she needs them. It is mid-morning now, and the decision has been made. They are going to hunt. Let me tell you about Neanderthal hunting because it is genuinely terrifying. We modern humans, when we think about hunting, tend to think about it the way later Homo sapiens did it, with projectile weapons, bows and arrows, thrown spears, atlatls, weapons that let you kill from a distance, from relative safety. Neanderthals did not have any of that. They had spears, yes, but they were thrusting spears, not throwing spears. Short, heavy, designed to be driven into an animal's body at close range. Very close range. We are talking about getting within arm's length of a wild horse, a bison, a woolly rhinoceros. Animals that weigh 10 times what you weigh, that can kick and gore and trample. The injury patterns on Neanderthal skeletons tell the story. They match the injury patterns of modern rodeo riders, people who routinely get dangerously close to large angry animals, broken ribs, fractured skulls, crushed vertebrae, healed puncture wounds. These people hunted the way a lion hunts, by getting close and using brute strength and sharp weapons at point-blank range. Today's target is a small group of red deer that have been spotted in the valley below. Red deer are not the biggest prey available, but they are not small either. A mature red deer stag can weigh over 400 pounds and is armed with antlers that can kill a person. The hunting party consists of 5 adults, 3 males and 2 females, including our mother. The others stay behind. The old man watches the children. The pregnant woman tends the fire. The one-armed man works on scraping a hide. Leaving people behind is not abandonment, it is strategy. A hunting party needs to be fast and mobile, and it needs the camp to be maintained for when it returns. The hunters prepare their weapons. Each carries a thrusting spear, about 6 feet long, made from a straight shaft of yew or ashwood, with a carefully shaped stone point hafted to the end with birch bark tar and bound with sinew. These are not crude tools. They are precision instruments, the product of a manufacturing tradition that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years. The stone points are made using a technique called Levallois flaking, which is basically the Stone Age equivalent of advanced engineering. You start with a carefully prepared stone core, shaping it into a specific form, almost like a turtle shell, and then you strike it in exactly the right place to detach a flake of precisely predetermined shape and size. It is unbelievably difficult. Modern flint knappers, people who practice this art today, say it takes years to master. Each flake comes off sharp enough to shave with, and the resulting point, when hafted to a spear shaft, can penetrate deep into an animal's body. The hunting party moves out of the cave and into the landscape. This is Ice Age France, and the terrain is nothing like what you would see there today. There are no vineyards, no lavender fields, no charming stone villages. The landscape is a mosaic of open grassland, scattered stands of pine and birch, and rocky outcrops. In the distance, mountains still carry their summer snow, and closer, the river that carved this valley glitters silver in the weak sunlight. The air is cold, maybe just above freezing, with a stiff breeze from the north that carries the smell of wet earth and pine resin. The hunters also carry other things besides spears. Each has a small pouch of some kind, made from animal skin, that contains personal items, a good piece of flint for making emergency tools, a lump of birch bark tar for repairs, dried tinder for fire starting, maybe a piece of iron pyrite that can be struck against flint to produce sparks. These are not survival kits in the modern sense, but they serve the same purpose. They are the essentials that an experienced hunter knows to carry, the difference between a manageable problem and a catastrophe. The mother also carries something else, though this is harder to see. She carries knowledge. In her mind is a detailed map of this entire landscape, a map that is not drawn on paper or stored on a phone but held in living memory, constantly updated, incredibly detailed. She knows every hill, every valley, every river crossing, every game trail within a day's walk of the cave. She knows where the deer prefer to graze at different times of year. She knows where the aurochs come to drink and where the wild horses shelter during storms. She knows which ravines are safe to descend and which have loose rock that will betray your footing. She knows where the cave lion was last seen, and she gives that area a wide berth. This mental map is one of the most remarkable things about Neanderthal cognition, and we have good evidence for it. Analysis of stone tool materials shows that Neanderthals regularly transported flint and other raw materials over distances of up to 60 miles from their source. This means they knew where specific resources were located across a vast territory, and they planned trips to collect them. They had mental maps of enormous complexity, updated through direct experience and shared information. The hunters move in single file, communicating with hand signals and occasional low vocalizations. They are heading downwind of where the deer were spotted, circling around to approach from a direction that will not carry their scent to the herd. This requires an intimate knowledge of the local wind patterns, the topography, the way air currents move through valleys and around hills. They have this knowledge. They have been reading this landscape their entire lives. The approach takes over an hour. They move slowly, carefully, using every fold in the terrain for cover. When they need to cross open ground, they do it at a crouch, one at a time, freezing if a deer head comes up. This is patient, methodical work, and it requires extraordinary discipline. One cough, one careless footstep, and the herd bolts. Hours of effort wasted. They get close, incredibly close. They're crouching behind a low ridge maybe 30 yards from the nearest deer. The mother can see the animals clearly now, 4 does, and a young stag. They're grazing on the cold-resistant grasses that grow along the riverbank, their heads down, their breath steaming in the cold air. There is a plan. There is always a plan. The 2 fastest hunters will circle around to the far side, positioning themselves to cut off the deer's most likely escape route. The mother and 2 others will move in from this side, driving the deer toward a narrow gap between 2 rock outcrops, where the animals will be funneled into a tight space. This is ambush hunting, and Neanderthals were masters of it. The signal is given. A soft, short whistle. The drivers stand up and rush forward, shouting, waving their arms. The deer panic just as planned and bolt away from the sudden noise. They run straight toward the gap in the rock, straight toward the 2 waiting hunters. What happens next takes less than 10 seconds and is the most dangerous moment of the day. The young stag comes through the gap first, running hard. One of the hunters steps out and drives his spear into its side, aiming for the area just behind the front leg where the lungs and heart are. The spear goes in deep. The stag staggers but does not go down. It turns, antlers swinging, and the hunter has to throw himself sideways to avoid being gored. The second hunter moves in and thrusts his spear into the animal's neck. Blood sprays. The stag goes down, kicking, and the mother is there now too, adding her spear to make sure it stays down. It takes a few minutes for the animal to die, and those minutes are the most dangerous of all. A wounded animal is desperate and unpredictable. Every hunter stays alert, stays moving, ready to dodge hooves and antlers. Finally, the stag is still. The hunters stand over it, breathing hard, adrenaline still coursing through them. Nobody's seriously hurt today, which is not always the case. The mother has a bruise on her shoulder where she hit the ground dodging a kick, and one of the males has a shallow cut on his arm from a glancing antler, but that is all. Today was a good day. Now comes the butchering, which is its own kind of skill. They work quickly, because the smell of blood will attract predators, wolves, cave lions, cave hyenas, any of which could turn a successful hunt into a deadly encounter. The mother is an expert butcher. She uses a sharp flint flake thin as a razor to open the carcass. She knows exactly where to cut to separate the joints, where to slice to peel the hide away cleanly, which organs to save and which to leave for the scavengers. The liver is eaten immediately, warm and raw, rich in iron and vitamins. This is standard practice for Neanderthal hunters, the same way Inuit hunters eat raw liver from a fresh kill. The remaining meat is divided into manageable portions and wrapped in sections of the hide. Each hunter takes a share, hoisting the heavy bundles onto their backs for the trek back to the cave. A mature red deer stag provides maybe 200 pounds of usable meat, plus marrow-rich bones, plus the hide, plus sinew for cordage, plus antler for tools. Almost nothing goes to waste. The walk back to the cave takes longer than the walk out, loaded down as they are. Each hunter is carrying 40 or 50 pounds of meat and bone, wrapped in sections of the hide and slung across their backs. The mother feels the weight in her shoulders and in that bad knee, a dull, grinding ache that she ignores the way she always ignores it. There is no choice. The meat has to get back to the cave. You do not leave 200 pounds of food on an open plain and come back for it later. By then the wolves would have it, or the hyenas, or the ravens and crows and foxes, all of which are watching, always watching, waiting for the hunters to leave so they can move in on the scraps. But the mood is different now. There is a quiet satisfaction in the group, a shared sense of accomplishment. They talk more freely, though still keeping watch for predators. One of the younger males is replaying the kill in his gestures and vocalizations, showing how the stag turned, how close the antlers came, the moment the second spear went in. The others listen and add their own perspectives. This is how hunting knowledge is transmitted. Not through formal instruction, but through story, through the retelling and analysis of what happened, what worked, what went wrong, what to do differently next time. Every hunt is a lesson, and every retelling reinforces it. They pass through a stand of birch trees on the way back, and the mother pauses to strip some bark from a fallen trunk. Good birch bark, the kind you need for making tar, is not always easy to find, and she has learned to collect it whenever she sees it. She tucks the rolled bark into the bundle on her back and keeps walking. This is the kind of small, habitual behaviour that does not make it into the movies or the documentaries, but it is the foundation of Neanderthal survival. The constant gathering, the endless awareness of resources, the habit of never passing up something useful. You are always collecting, always preparing, always thinking a few days, a few weeks, a few seasons ahead. The cave comes into view as they crest the last hill, and the mother feels the familiar surge of something that might be called relief, or homecoming, or just the simple animal pleasure of returning to a safe place after being in a dangerous one. The smoke from the fire is visible as a thin grey line against the pale sky. The entrance of the cave is a dark mouth in the white limestone cliff, and from inside that mouth, small figures are already emerging, drawn by the sight of the returning hunters, and when they arrive, the children come running, and the old man smiles, and the pregnant woman reaches for the best pieces of meat, and the one-armed man helps unload the bundles as best he can with his one good hand, and for a little while everything is good. Everything is provided for. The group will eat well for several days, but the day is far from over, and the next phase of it is, in some ways, even more fascinating than the hunt. Because now we are going to talk about Neanderthal technology, and I promise you, it is going to change how you think about these people. Let us start with the basics. The mother settles near the fire in the early afternoon, the successful hunt behind her, and she turns her attention to something she's been working on for several days. A new tool. Specifically, she's making a stone scraper using the Mousterian technique, named after the rock shelter of Le Moustier in the Dordogne region of France, where these tools were first identified. The Mousterian toolkit is the signature technology of the Neanderthals, and it is staggeringly sophisticated. Here is how it works. You start with a nodule of flint, a hard, fine-grained stone that fractures in predictable ways when struck. But you do not just whack at it randomly. First, you prepare a core. You carefully shape the nodule by striking small flakes off its surface, creating a domed top that resembles a turtle shell. This is the Levallois technique I mentioned earlier, and it is essentially a method of predetermined flake production. You are shaping the core so that when you finally strike the crucial blow, the flake that comes off will be exactly the shape and size you want. Think about what that means. You're not just reacting to the stone. You're thinking 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. You're holding a mental image of the finished product in your mind and working backward from there to plan each strike. This is abstract thinking. This is engineering. This is problem solving at a level that was for decades attributed only to Homo sapiens, and Neanderthals were doing it for 300,000 years before we ever showed up in Europe. The mother strikes the core with a hammerstone, a smooth, heavy cobble that fits perfectly in her hand. The Levallois flake comes off cleanly, a thin, sharp piece of flint about 3 inches long and roughly teardrop-shaped. She examines it, turning it in the light. It is good. The edges are sharp and regular. The cross-section is thin enough to slice but thick enough not to shatter on first use. She will use this as a scraper for processing the deer hide from today's kill, but tools are only part of the story. Let me tell you about Neanderthal glue, because it is genuinely one of the most impressive things in the entire archaeological record. Birch bark tar. This is a synthetic material, meaning it does not occur naturally. You have to make it. And making it requires a specific controlled process that goes like this. You take birch bark, roll it tightly, and seal it inside a container of some kind, a pit dug in the ground, or a wrapped package of clay, or even a rolled up piece of bark sealed with mud. Then you heat it, not over a flame but near one, at a carefully controlled temperature. Too hot and the bark burns to ash. Too cool and nothing happens. But at just the right temperature, around 350 degrees Celsius, the bark undergoes a process called dry distillation, and a thick, sticky black substance oozes out. That is birch bark tar. It is waterproof. It is strong. It is the oldest synthetic material ever created by human hands, predating Homo sapiens' use of adhesives by tens of thousands of years, and Neanderthals used it to haft their stone tools to wooden handles. They used it to attach spear points to shafts. They may have used it to waterproof containers or mend cracked tools. This is not the behavior of mindless brutes. This is chemistry. This is engineering. This is a level of technological sophistication that went completely unrecognized for decades because we were too busy thinking of Neanderthals as primitive. But the Mousterian toolkit was not limited to stone. Neanderthals also made tools from bone and antler and wood. Wooden spears are actually older than stone-tipped ones, going back hundreds of thousands of years. At the site of Schöningen in Germany, archaeologists found a set of wooden throwing spears. beautifully crafted from spruce, that are over 300,000 years old. These were not crude sticks. They were carefully shaped, balanced for throwing, with fire-hardened tips. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, and it tells us that long before anyone attached a stone point to a wooden shaft, humans were already master woodworkers. The mother knows wood the way a carpenter knows wood. She can look at a branch and tell you whether it will make a good spear shaft or a good digging stick or a good handle for a stone tool. She knows which woods are flexible and which are rigid, which split easily and which resist splitting, which take fire hardening well and which burn through. She knows that yew is the best wood for spear shafts because it is dense and straight-grained and resilient. She knows that birch bark comes off easiest in spring when the sap is running. She knows that green wood must be dried slowly or it will crack, and that seasoned wood must be stored carefully or it will rot. This is materials science, learned not from textbooks, but from a lifetime of hands-on experience passed down through thousands of generations. There were also bone tools, made from the long bones of large animals, shaped by scraping and grinding into awls for piercing leather, needles for sewing, scrapers for working hides, and burnishers for smoothing and polishing. Bone tools are harder to identify in the archaeological record because they decompose more easily than stone, but where they have been preserved, they show the same level of care and skill as stone tools. Each one was made for a specific purpose, shaped to fit the hand that would use it, maintained and repaired and resharpened over its useful life. And then there are the compound tools, the tools made from multiple materials assembled together. A stone point hafted to a wooden shaft with birch bark tar and bound with sinew. A bone awl set into a wooden handle. A flint scraper lashed to a piece of antler for better grip. These compound tools represent a quantum leap in technological thinking. You are no longer just modifying a single piece of raw material, you are combining different materials with different properties to create something that is greater than the sum of its parts. You are engineering, and it requires planning. You cannot just sit down and make a hafted spear in an afternoon. First you need to find and process the right stone. Then you need to find and prepare the right wood. Then you need to make the birch bark tar, which is a whole separate process. Then you need to prepare the sinew by drying and splitting tendons from an animal kill. Then you need to assemble everything, fitting the parts together, heating the tar, binding the joint, waiting for everything to set. The whole process might take days, spread out over weeks. It requires patience and foresight and the ability to hold a complex multi-step plan in your mind. This is not primitive behavior. This is sophisticated, intelligent, forward-thinking behavior. And Neanderthals were doing it routinely for 300,000 years. The mother uses birch bark tar now, repairing a spear that was damaged during the hunt. The wooden shaft has a small crack near the point, and she heats a lump of tar by the fire, softening it until it becomes workable, then presses it into the crack with her thumb and smooths it over. She binds the repair with wet sinew, which will shrink as it dries, tightening the joint. When she is done, the spear will be as strong as new, and the injury she got during the hunt, that bruise on her shoulder, well, it is not serious. But it makes me think about something that is serious, Neanderthal medicine. And the answer to how they dealt with injuries and illness is stranger and more impressive than you might think. We already talked about the one-armed man in the group, and how his survival speaks to a tradition of care that goes far beyond what most people expect from Neanderthals. But let us go deeper. At the site of Shanidar Cave in what is now Iraqi Kurdistan, archaeologists found the remains of a Neanderthal man who has become known as Shanidar I. His injuries are almost beyond belief. He had been struck on the left side of his head with enough force to crush his eye socket and probably blind him in that eye. He had a withered right arm, probably paralysed from birth or early childhood, that had been amputated below the elbow at some point during his life. He had healed fractures in his right foot that would have left him with a severe limp. He had degenerative joint disease. He was, in modern medical terms, disabled in multiple ways that should have made survival in the Ice Age impossible, and yet he lived to be somewhere between 40 and 50 years old. Let that sink in. In a world where you had to hunt your food, make your tools, build your shelter, and fight off predators, a blind, one-armed, limping man survived for decades. He did not do it alone. He could not have done it alone. His group kept him alive. They fed him. They protected him. They cared for him, day after day, year after year, for his entire adult life. This is not a marginal case. Across the Neanderthal fossil record, we find example after example of individuals who survived serious injuries and disabilities with the help of their communities. healed broken bones that were clearly set and splintered, infected wounds that were treated and survived, diseases that were nursed through. These people had medicine. Maybe not medicine in the way we think of it, but something close enough to count. Remember those traces of chamomile and yarrow found in Neanderthal dental plaque? Chamomile has anti-inflammatory and antibacterial properties. Yarrow is a known remedy for pain and fever, and has been used in folk medicine for millennia. These plants have no nutritional value. You would not eat them unless you knew what they did. The fact that Neanderthals were consuming them strongly suggests that they were using them as medicine, self-medicating with specific plants to treat specific symptoms. We also have evidence that Neanderthals practiced something like dental care. Multiple Neanderthal teeth show grooves consistent with the habitual use of toothpicks, small sticks or thin bones used to clean between teeth. Some of these grooves are associated with dental abscesses, suggesting that the individual was trying to relieve pain or remove infected material from around a diseased tooth. The mother knows about these things. She learned them the way she learned everything else, by watching, by remembering, by doing. When one of the children scrapes a knee, she chews yarrow leaves into a paste and presses it against the wound. When old Car's joints ache in the cold, she makes him a tea of sorts, hot water poured over chamomile flowers in a hollow piece of bark. She knows which mosses absorb blood and can be packed into a wound. She knows that keeping a cut clean helps it heal. She knows, in some practical if not theoretical way, the basics of wound care and pain management and infection control. This is folk medicine, passed down through generations without ever being written down, a living tradition of healing knowledge that existed for hundreds of thousands of years before anyone thought to call it science. And it was not just physical medicine. Think about what it means to comfort someone who is in pain, to sit with someone who is sick and hold their hand and keep them warm and bring them water and simply be there. That is medicine too. The medicine of presence. The medicine of not being alone when your body is failing you, and Neanderthals practiced it constantly. The evidence is written in the bones of every individual who survived an injury that should have killed them. Someone sat with them, someone fed them, someone kept the fire going while they lay helpless, and someone chased away the fear that comes in the dark hours of the night when the pain is worst and the future is most uncertain. We do the same thing today, of course. We sit in hospital rooms, we bring soup to sick friends, we hold the hands of the dying. We have been doing it for so long that we do not even think about it anymore. It just seems obvious, natural, the right thing to do. But it was not always obvious. At some point in our evolutionary history, some ancestor of ours made the choice to care for the sick and injured instead of abandoning them. And that choice, that revolutionary moral choice, is one of the things that makes us human. The Neanderthals made that choice. They made it over and over in cave after cave, generation after generation for hundreds of thousands of years. And if that does not change how you think about them, I do not know what will. There is also evidence that Neanderthals understood something about hygiene, even if they would not have called it that. At several cave sites, archaeologists have found that living spaces and waste areas were deliberately separated. Toolmaking was done in one part of the cave, butchering in another, sleeping in another. The refuse, the bone scraps and flint debris and other waste was often pushed to the edges of the living space, or deposited in specific areas away from where people ate and slept. This is not random behaviour. This is organised, planned use of space that suggests an understanding, however intuitive, that certain kinds of waste need to be kept away from certain kinds of activity. It is the earliest evidence of what you might call public health, and it was happening in Neanderthal caves tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote the word down. The afternoon wears on. The hide from the deer kill needs processing, and several of the women work on it together, scraping it clean with stone tools, stretching it on a frame of sticks, and beginning the slow process of working it until it is soft enough to use. Making usable leather from a raw hide takes days and is physically exhausting work. You have to scrape and pull and rub and stretch, over and over, until the stiff skin becomes supple. Some Neanderthals used a technique called brain tanning, where the animal's own brain is worked into the hide. Brain tissue contains natural oils and tanning agents called lecithins that bond with the skin fibers and make them flexible and water-resistant. It is messy, smelly, unpleasant work, but the results are remarkable. Soft, durable leather that can be used for clothing, bedding, bags, and shelter coverings. But here is a question that is oddly fascinating. What was their inner life like? What did Neanderthals think about? What did they feel? This is where we get into territory that science can only partially illuminate, where the hard evidence gives way to informed speculation and the boundaries of what we can know. But there are clues. At the site of Bruniquel Cave in southern France, deep underground in total darkness, researchers discovered something astonishing. 2 ring-shaped structures made from broken stalagmites, carefully arranged in circles. They were dated to approximately 176,000 years ago, tens of thousands of years before Homo sapiens arrived in Europe. Neanderthals made them, and here is the thing, these structures are deep inside the cave, more than 1,000 feet from the entrance, in complete and absolute darkness. Making them required sustained torchlight, which means fire carried into the cave. They had no practical purpose that anyone has been able to identify. They were not shelters. They were not food storage. They were not defensive. They were something else. Some researchers think they may have been symbolic or ritualistic. Others are more cautious. But whatever they were, they represent planning, effort and purpose directed towards something that was not about immediate survival. That is suggestive at the very least of minds that were doing more than just meeting basic needs. Around the fire in the evening, as the day's work winds down and the light fades, the social life of the group comes into its fullest expression. This is the time for communication, for bonding, for whatever passed for culture among these people. The children are playing near the fire, a rough and tumble game that involves a lot of chasing and mock fighting. The mother watches them with the mixture of amusement and anxiety that all parents know. The 7-year-old is fast and clever, already showing the coordination that will make him a good hunter someday. The 3-year-old is trying to keep up with the older children and mostly failing, which makes her frustrated and loud. Neanderthal group sizes were small, typically between 10 and 30 individuals. This meant that everyone knew everyone intimately. There were no strangers, no acquaintances, only family. The bonds within these groups must have been extraordinarily intense. When you live with the same 15 people every day, sleeping next to them, hunting with them, eating with them, caring for their wounds and celebrating their kills, the relationships you build are deeper than anything most modern humans experience. Think about the closest relationship in your life, and then multiply that by everyone around you. That is what it was like. Communication was at the center of everything. We have already established that Neanderthals could speak, but what did they talk about? Practical matters, certainly. Where to hunt, where to find water, how to make tools, warnings about predators, plans for tomorrow. But probably more than that too. We know that Neanderthals had an aesthetic sense, at least to some degree. In various caves, we have found evidence of Neanderthals collecting pigments, especially manganese dioxide, a black mineral, and iron oxide, which produces red and yellow colours. These were not used for tool making or any practical purpose we can identify. They were used to colour things. Some researchers believe Neanderthals painted their bodies. Others think they may have decorated objects or even cave walls. The evidence is not as clear as we would like, but it is there. At the site of Cueva de los Aviones in Spain, shells were found that had been perforated and stained with red and yellow pigments. These were not food items, they were decorations, personal ornaments, possibly worn as necklaces or pendants. And they are dated to around 115,000 years ago, which means Neanderthals were making jewellery tens of thousands of years before Homo sapiens arrived in Europe. Let that sink in. Jewellery. The desire to adorn the body, to make yourself more beautiful, to express identity through decoration. This is symbolic behaviour. This is culture. This is art. And Neanderthals were doing it. There is also the matter of eagle talons. At several Neanderthal sites across Europe, eagle talons have been found with cut marks and polishing that indicate they were collected, modified, and probably worn as jewellery. White-tailed eagle talons are big, impressive, beautiful objects. Collecting them required effort and skill. Eagles do not just hand over their talons. You have to catch or scavenge them, and then you have to process the claws, cutting them free, cleaning them, drilling or notching them for stringing. This was purposeful, skilled work directed at creating something that had no practical survival value whatsoever. It was done because it was beautiful, because it meant something, because wearing the talons of an eagle said something about who you were, and there is another piece of evidence that I find deeply moving. At several sites, we have found collections of natural objects that seem to have been gathered simply because they were interesting. fossils, crystals, unusually coloured stones, shells found far from the sea. These are curiosity collections, cabinet of the wonders behaviour. A Neanderthal picked up a pretty rock or an interesting fossil and carried it home, not because it was useful, but because it caught their eye, because it made them wonder, because it was beautiful or strange or simply different from everything around it. You probably have something like that on your desk right now. A cool rock from a beach trip, a shell from vacation, a crystal someone gave you. That impulse, the impulse to collect the interesting and the beautiful, might be older than our species. And then there is the question of music. Could Neanderthals sing? There is a bone flute from the cave of Divja Babe in Slovenia, dated to around 60,000 years ago, that some researchers attribute to Neanderthals. It is made from a cave bear femur and has holes that produce recognizable musical tones when blown. Not everyone agrees that it is a flute. Some think the holes were made by a hyena's teeth. But if it is a flute, it means Neanderthals were making music. Even without the Divja Babe flute, the idea of Neanderthal music is not as far-fetched as it might sound. They had the vocal apparatus for it. Humming, singing, rhythmic chanting. These are things that require no technology, just a voice and an impulse to use it. And the impulse to make music seems to be deeply human, present in every culture ever studied. It would be more surprising if Neanderthals did not make music in some form. Imagine the scene. The fire has been built up, the day's work is done, the meat is cooked and eaten. The children are growing sleepy. The adults are sitting close together, the warmth of the fire on their faces, the dark of the cave at their backs. And someone starts to hum. A low, resonant sound that fills the cave like the vibration of a bowstring. Others join in. It is not a melody in the way you would recognize it, not a song with words and verses, but a sound, a shared sound, a communal expression of something, satisfaction maybe, or belonging, or gratitude, or just the simple pleasure of being alive and warm and fed at the end of a hard day. Maybe that happened, maybe it did not. We will never know for certain. But the possibility alone is enough to make you rethink everything you thought you knew about these people. The mother settles her children for the night. The 3-year-old is already asleep, draped across the mother's lap like a warm, heavy blanket. The mother transfers her gently to the sleeping furs, tucking bison hide around her small body. The 7-year-old resists sleep the way 7-year-olds always have, wanting one more story, one more moment by the fire, but eventually his eyes close and his breathing deepens and he too is gone. The mother sits by the fire a little longer, watching the flames, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere outside a wolf howls. It is a familiar sound, neither frightening nor comforting, just part of the world. She adds a few more sticks to the fire. She checks the drying meat, turning the strips so they cure evenly. She looks at the sleeping faces of her children and feels whatever a Neanderthal mother felt when she looked at her sleeping children. We do not have a word for it in any language that quite captures what it must have been like to love someone that fiercely in a world that dangerous. But she felt it. Of that, I have no doubt. She felt it the way you feel it, the way every parent has felt it for millions of years, that overwhelming mix of love and terror and determination that sits in your chest like a stone and says, I will keep you alive, no matter what. I will keep you alive. Eventually she lies down next to them, pulls the furs up to her chin, and closes her eyes. The cave settles into its nighttime rhythm. Someone coughs softly in the darkness. A child murmurs in their sleep. The fire pops, and a shower of tiny sparks rises like orange stars, swirling briefly before winking out against the dark ceiling. Outside, the world continues its ancient business without them. An owl calls from somewhere in the birch stand below the cave. A fox picks its way along the riverbank, its eyes bright in the moonlight. Far away, impossibly far away in the deep darkness of the glacial north, the ice sheets groan and shift, their slow, continent-grinding weight pressing down on the earth with a force that will leave scars on the landscape for 100,000 years. But the mother does not know about ice sheets, she does not know about continents or geology, or the vast stretches of time that have shaped this world. She knows the cave, she knows the fire, she knows the weight of her children against her body and the way the cold seeps in around the edges of the bison hide when the wind shifts. She knows that tomorrow she'll wake up and do all of this again. The fire, the food, the work, the love, the endless, exhausting, beautiful labour of keeping everyone alive for one more day. And right now, in this moment between waking and sleeping, that is enough. That is everything. The fire crackles, the cave breathes, and in the darkness of Ice Age France, a family sleeps, but that is just one day. One day out of maybe 12,000. Because that is roughly how many days a Neanderthal who lived to 40 would experience. 12,000 sunrises, 12,000 sunsets, and each one was a victory, because in this world, just surviving to see another dawn was never guaranteed. So let us widen the lens now. Let us look at the arc of a whole life, not just the daily routine but the larger pattern. The seasons that passed, the years that accumulated, the slow, relentless process of aging in a world without mercy. We have already covered her childhood and her young adulthood. We have seen her as a mother in her prime. But what comes next is in some ways the most poignant part of the story. Growing old as a Neanderthal. Let us move forward a few years. The mother is now 32. She has had another child, a boy, born 2 years ago. Her older son is now 9 and has begun joining the hunting parties in a minor role, carrying equipment, learning the approach patterns, watching how the adults coordinate. Her daughter is 5 and is already showing signs of the same fierce independence that her mother had at that age. The group has changed too. Old Carr finally died last winter. It was not dramatic, not violent. He simply got weaker and weaker over the course of several weeks, eating less, sleeping more, until one morning he did not wake up. The group grieved in their way, which we will talk about later. The pregnant woman from before has had her baby, a healthy girl, and is already one of the most attentive mothers in the group. The one-armed man is still alive, still contributing what he can, though he too is showing signs of age. And the mother herself is beginning to feel the weight of her years. 32 does not sound old to us. In the modern world, 32 is young. You're just hitting your stride at 32. But in the Neanderthal world, 32 is the beginning of the decline. The accumulated damage of decades of hard physical labour is catching up. Her joints ache constantly now, not just when the weather changes. Her left knee, the one that was injured years ago, has developed a grinding sensation that makes climbing and descending slopes painful. Her teeth are worn down to the point where eating tough meat requires real effort. She has lost one molar completely, and another is cracked and aching. The arthritis is the worst of it. Archaeological analysis of Neanderthal remains shows that degenerative joint disease was extremely common, almost universal in individuals over 30. Their bodies were designed for power, for short bursts of incredible physical effort, but they were not designed for longevity. The constant stress on their joints, from hunting, from tool-making, from the simple daily labour of survival in a cold, hard world, took a devastating toll. The mother adapts. She hunts less now, leaving the most dangerous work to the younger adults. She focuses instead on the tasks that require skill and knowledge more than raw physical power. She makes tools. She processes hides. She tends the fire. She watches the children. She teaches. This shift in role is not a loss of status. If anything, it is the opposite. As the mother ages, her knowledge becomes more valuable, not less. She is now the person who remembers the bad winter 7 years ago, when the group had to relocate to a different cave because their usual shelter was blocked by a landslide. She remembers where the secondary flint sources are, the ones you only need when the primary source is depleted or inaccessible. She remembers which berries made the children sick that one summer, and which stream is reliable even in drought. She's becoming what Carr was, a living repository of critical knowledge, the group's memory. And the children gravitate toward her. Not just her own children, but all the children in the group. She's patient with them in a way that the younger, busier adults cannot always be. She shows them how to strike a flint core. She lets them practice with small, safe pieces. She tells them things, in whatever way Neanderthals told each other things, about the world beyond the valley, about the animals, about the way the seasons change. At night, by the fire, she is the centre of the group's social world. The younger adults defer to her experience. The children cluster around her for warmth and security. The other elders, those who remain, share the quiet camaraderie of people who have survived what most of their generation did not. The seasons have their own rhythm now, and she feels them more acutely than she did when she was young. Spring is a relief, a loosening of the cold's grip, the return of the herds, the first green shoots pushing through the muddy ground. She watches the world come back to life and feels a kind of gratitude that is hard to put into words. Summer is brief and precious. the warmest weeks of the year, when the days are long and the food is abundant and the children play outside until the light fades. She savours summer now in a way she never did when she was young, because she understands, in a way that only age teaches, how quickly it passes. Autumn is preparation, a frantic gathering of resources before winter comes, drying meat, stockpiling firewood, curing hides, making sure the cave is as weatherproof as possible. And winter is endurance. It is the season that kills, and surviving it is the central project of Neanderthal life. Every winter she has lived through has left its mark on her, and now, in her early 30s, those marks are adding up. She remembers winters that took people. The winter when she was 12, when a boy in her birth group died of a fever that turned his skin red and his breathing ragged. The winter 3 years ago, when old Carr began his final decline, eating less each day, talking less, sleeping more, until the morning came when he did not wake. The winter before that, when a hunting party was caught in a sudden blizzard, and one of the young males nearly died of exposure before the others half carried him back to the cave. Each winter is a test, and with every year that passes she is a little less sure she will pass it. But she does not dwell on this. Neanderthals did not have the luxury of existential anxiety, or if they did not have the vocabulary to express it. She just keeps going. She tends the fire. She teaches the children. She makes tools when her hands allow it and gives directions when they do not. She watches the world with eyes that have seen more of it than most of her species ever will, and she waits for spring. But time is not kind to anyone, and it was especially unkind to Neanderthals. By the time the mother is 35, the decline has accelerated. Her arthritis is severe now. Her hands, once so strong and dexterous, are stiff and painful. The fine motor work of tool-making is becoming harder. Her eyesight is not what it was. She has trouble focusing on close work in the dim light of the cave. Her teeth are a constant source of pain. She has 2 abscesses now, and despite the yarrow and the toothpick sticks she uses to clean around them, they flare up regularly, causing her whole jaw to throb and swell. She has also started to cough, a persistent rattling cough that gets worse in the cold weather and never entirely goes away. We do not know what disease this represents. Maybe tuberculosis, which is ancient. Maybe chronic bronchitis from a lifetime of breathing wood smoke in enclosed spaces. Maybe something else entirely. But it weakens her, slowly, steadily, the way a river erodes a stone. The group cares for her now the way she once cared for old Carr. The younger women bring her the best food, the softest meat, the richest marrow. Her oldest son, now a powerful young hunter, makes sure she has fresh bedding and a warm place by the fire. Her daughter, at 9, is already taking on some of her mother's domestic responsibilities, learning by doing, carrying on the chain of knowledge. The mother accepts this care with whatever grace a Neanderthal could muster. She's not done yet. She still has things to teach, knowledge to pass on, a role to play. But she knows, in whatever way a Neanderthal could know such things, that her time is shortening. The seasons pass. Another winter, another spring. The herds return to the valley. The flowers bloom on the hillsides. The river, swollen with snowmelt, roars through its channel. The mother watches all of this from the mouth of the cave, her body too tired now for the long walk she once took without thinking. She watches her grandchild playing in the dirt, the baby of the woman who was pregnant that morning we first met the group. She watches the young hunters leave for the hunt, their spears over their shoulders, their bodies full of the strength and confidence that she remembers having, that she can still feel the ghost of in her aching muscles. She watches the fire, the eternal fire, the fire that has been burning in this cave or one like it for longer than anyone can remember. Fire is life for Neanderthals, not just warmth, not just cooking, but the centre of everything. The hearth around which all of social life revolves, the light that holds back the darkness, the source of comfort on cold nights and long days. She has tended fires her entire life, from the first tiny ember she nursed into flame as a child to this one now, that she feeds with stiff and trembling hands. The mother is 37 now, maybe 38. It is hard to know exactly. She has lived longer than most Neanderthals ever did. The average lifespan was probably somewhere around 30 to 35, with a few hardy individuals making it to 40, or occasionally beyond. She has beaten the odds already. But the odds are catching up. The end, when it comes, is not sudden. It is not a hunting accident or a predator attack or any of the dramatic deaths that we might imagine for a Neanderthal. It is the quiet, undramatic death of a body that has simply used itself up. The cough gets worse through the autumn, a deep, wet sound that shakes her whole frame and leaves her breathless. She eats less, not because food is scarce, but because her appetite has faded, the way a fire fades when the fuel runs out. The other women try to tempt her with the food she once loved, the rich, fatty marrow, the tender meat from a young deer's haunch, but she picks at them and turns away. Her body is telling her something, and she is listening to it. Even if she does not have the words for what it means, she sleeps more. She spends entire days wrapped in furs by the fire, drifting in and out of a shallow sleep, waking to drink water that her daughter brings her, waking to look at the faces around her, waking to feel the warmth of the fire on her skin and the weight of the furs on her body and the presence of her family, her people, around her. The group knows what is happening. They have seen this before. They have all seen this before. Death is not hidden in this world, not sanitized and sequestered in hospitals and hospice wards. It happens right here, in the cave, by the fire, in front of everyone, and everyone knows what it looks like. The children are quieter than usual. The adults speak in softer tones. Someone, probably her daughter, keeps the fire burning brighter than it needs to be, as if extra warmth could hold back what is coming. And then one morning, like old Carr before her, she does not wake up. She dies in her sleep, in the cave where she has lived for over 2 decades, surrounded by the people who loved her, warmed by a fire that will continue burning after she is gone. What happens next is the subject of one of the most enduring debates in paleoanthropology. Did Neanderthals bury their dead? The evidence says yes, at least sometimes, though the details are hotly contested. At Shanidar Cave, the same site where the disabled Neanderthal man was found, archaeologist Ralph Selecki discovered what he believed was a Neanderthal burial accompanied by flowers. Pollen analysis of the soil around the body revealed concentrations of several plant species, including yarrow, cornflower, and hollyhock. Selecki argued that this meant flowers had been deliberately placed with the body, a Neanderthal funeral with floral tributes. The flower burial hypothesis has been challenged over the years. Some researchers argue that the pollen could have been carried in by burrowing rodents or blown in by wind. The debate continues. But whether or not there were flowers at Shanidar, the fact remains that the body was deliberately placed in a pit and covered with earth. That is burial. That is not something that happens by accident, and Shanidar is not the only example. At La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, a Neanderthal man was found in a pit that had been deliberately dug into the cave floor and then filled in. At Kibara Cave in Israel, a Neanderthal was buried in a shallow grave. At multiple sites across Europe and the Middle East, we find Neanderthal bodies that have been intentionally placed, often in flexed positions with their knees drawn up, sometimes with objects nearby, tools, animal bones, pieces of pigment. So let us imagine, with all due caution and humility, what might have happened when the mother died. The group gathers around her body. There is no wailing, perhaps, in the way we might imagine grief, but there is something, a stillness, a heaviness in the air, a collective understanding that the world has changed, that something irreplaceable has been lost. Her daughter and her sons prepare the body. They flex her legs up, draw her arms in, arrange her in the sleeping position she held every night of her life. They carry her to a place near the back of the cave, a place that is out of the way but still within the warmth of the fire's reach. They dig a shallow depression in the cave floor with flat stones and antler picks, and they lay her in it carefully, gently, the way you would lay a sleeping child in bed. Maybe they place things with her, a favourite tool perhaps, a piece of red ochre, maybe flowers if the season is right, or maybe not. Maybe they simply cover her with earth and stones and stand over the grave for a while, each of them carrying whatever private grief a Neanderthal heart could hold. And then they go on, because that is what you do in the Ice Age. You grieve and you go on. The fire still needs tending, the children still need feeding, the hunt still needs to happen. Life, relentless and demanding and beautiful, does not stop for death. In the days that follow, the group adjusts. Her sleeping space is not immediately occupied. The furs where she lay remain undisturbed for a while, as if the others are reluctant to erase the last physical trace of her presence. Her tools are divided among those who can use them, her best scraper going to her daughter, her favourite hammerstone to her oldest son. These are not just tools now, they are inheritances, objects that carry something of her skill, and her years and her care in their worn surfaces and sharp edges. The group dynamics shift as well. Her daughter steps into a more central role, not because anyone appoints her, but because she has the knowledge and the competence and the temperament for it. She learned from her mother. She carries her mother's skills in her hands and her mother's wisdom in her memory. And in this way, the mother lives on in the group even after her body's in the ground. Her knowledge, her techniques, her ways of doing things, they continue in the people she taught. This is how culture works. This is how it has always worked, not through books or schools or formal education, but through the daily transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next, from hand to hand, from mind to mind, an unbroken chain of teaching and learning that stretches back to the very beginning of our kind. The mother was one link in that chain, and when she died, the chain did not break. It continued. It continues still. And there is one more thing about Neanderthal death that I want you to know, because it speaks to something deep about who these people were. At some burial sites, particularly at Shanidar, there is evidence that the graves were revisited. The soil above the bodies shows signs of disturbance at different time periods, as though people came back perhaps to add objects, perhaps to tend the site, perhaps simply to be near the person they had lost. We cannot prove this with certainty. The evidence is ambiguous, as archaeological evidence so often is, but the possibility is there. The possibility that Neanderthals remembered their dead, that they went back to the place where their loved ones were buried and sat there and felt whatever a Neanderthal feels when they miss someone. Grief is one of the oldest human emotions. It is the price we pay for love, and the Neanderthals, it seems, paid it. There is a story that the bones at La Ferracie in France seem to tell. Here, in a rock shelter not unlike the one where our mother lived, archaeologists found the remains of what appears to be a Neanderthal family. 2 adults and several children, buried in close proximity over what seems to have been a period of time. The adults were placed in shallow graves with their bodies in flexed positions. The children, some of whom were very young, infants even, were buried nearby. One of the children's graves contained a limestone slab with small cut marks carved into its underside. Marks that appear to have been made deliberately, though their meaning is unknown. Think about that scene for a moment. A group of Neanderthals, over a period of months or perhaps years, burying their dead in the same place. Coming back to this spot, digging another small grave, laying another body down, covering it with earth. Each burial a fresh wound, each return to this place a reminder of what was lost. And yet they kept coming back. They kept burying their dead here, in this one spot, as if the proximity mattered, as if keeping the dead together was important, as if there was something comforting about knowing that the people you loved were all in one place, together in death as they had been in life. Is that religion? Is it ritual? Is it simply the deeply human need to put things in their proper place, to create order in the face of chaos, to say this is where they belong? We do not know. We may never know. But the behaviour itself is unmistakable, and it is profoundly, recognisably human. And there is the matter of fire and death. At several Neanderthal burial sites, there is evidence that fires were lit near or over the graves. At some sites, the soil around the burials contains charcoal and ash deposits that suggest deliberate burning. Whether this was practical, to mark the grave, to drive away scavengers, to warm the earth before digging, or symbolic, a final gift of warmth and light for someone who would never feel them again, we cannot say. But the combination of burial and fire feels significant. It feels meaningful. It feels like something more than just disposing of a body. But she is not gone. Not entirely. And this is the part of the story that I find most extraordinary. The part that connects her to you, right now, tonight, wherever you are lying as you listen to this. In the early 2000s, scientists sequencing the Neanderthal genome made a discovery that stunned the world. Modern humans of non-African descent carry Neanderthal DNA. Between 1 and 4% of the genome of every person of European, Asian or Native American ancestry comes from Neanderthals. This means that at some point, probably between 50 and 60,000 years ago, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals met and had children together. Those children survived. They had children of their own. And those genetic contributions have been passed down, generation after generation, for thousands of generations, all the way to you. If you have any ancestry from outside of sub-Saharan Africa, you carry Neanderthal DNA in your cells right now. Tonight, as you lie in bed, the legacy of people like our mother is literally woven into your biology. Some of that DNA is still active, still doing things. Neanderthal genes have been linked to immune system function, particularly our ability to fight off certain pathogens. They have been linked to skin and hair characteristics, to pain sensitivity, to sleep patterns, and to the way our bodies handle fat metabolism. The strength and resilience that helped Neanderthals survive Ice Age Europe is, in a very real sense, still helping you survive today. Think about that for a moment. The mother we have been following tonight, she died 60,000 years ago in a cave in France. But her bloodline did not end with her. Her children lived. Her grandchildren lived. And somewhere along the line, her descendants, or the descendants of someone very much like her, met a group of strange, tall, slender newcomers who had recently arrived from Africa. And instead of just fighting or fleeing, some of them chose each other. Some of them had families together. And those families changed the course of human history. There is something else about Neanderthal DNA that deserves mention, because it adds another layer to this already extraordinary story. When scientists first sequenced the Neanderthal genome, they expected to find it in a small number of modern populations in a narrow geographic region. Instead, they found it everywhere outside of Africa. East Asians, South Asians, Europeans, Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, Aboriginal Australians. Essentially every population whose ancestors passed through the Middle East on their way out of Africa carries Neanderthal DNA. This means the interbreeding was not a one-time event. It happened multiple times, in multiple places, over thousands of years. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were not just meeting occasionally by accident. They were living in overlapping territories, sharing landscapes, and having children together with enough regularity that the genetic signal persists 60,000 years later in billions of people alive today. And the specific Neanderthal genes that survived in our genome are not random. Natural selection kept the ones that were useful and discarded the ones that were not. The genes that remain tend to be the ones that helped Homo sapiens adapt to the cold, dark, pathogen-rich environments of Europe and Asia, environments that Neanderthals had already been adapting to for hundreds of thousands of years. In a very real sense, Neanderthals gave us a toolkit for surviving in their world. They gave us genetic adaptations that took them hundreds of millennia to develop, and we received them in a single generation through the simple, ancient act of having children together. It is one of the most beautiful genetic stories in all of human evolution, and it means that the mother we have been following tonight, even though she lived and died in a world we can barely imagine, is not a stranger to us. She is family, distant family, separated by 2,000 generations and 60,000 years, but family nonetheless. The Neanderthals as a species did not survive. They disappeared from the fossil record around 40,000 years ago, their populations dwindling over thousands of years until the last small groups faded away in the mountains of southern Spain and the caves of Gibraltar. The reasons for their extinction are debated, and honestly the answer probably is not simple. Climate change played a role. The rapid oscillations of Ice Age weather pushed their already small populations into shrinking pockets of habitable land. Competition with Homo sapiens, who arrived in Europe around 45,000 years ago and brought with them superior projectile weapons and larger social networks, certainly made things harder. Disease, carried by those same Homo sapiens from tropical Africa, may have devastated immune systems that had no experience with new pathogens. Low genetic diversity, the inevitable consequence of small isolated populations, reduced their ability to adapt. Probably a combination of all of these and more, but they did not vanish entirely. They live on in us, in our DNA, in our bones, in the way our immune systems fight infection, and the way our skin responds to sunlight, and maybe, just maybe, in something deeper. In the impulse to care for the sick, in the drive to make things with our hands, in the need to sit around a fire with the people we love and feel for just a moment that everything is going to be okay. Think about that impulse for a second. The campfire impulse. Why do we love sitting around fires? Most of us do not need fire for warmth or cooking anymore. We have central heating and electric stoves, and yet, given the chance, we gravitate toward fire, campfires, fireplaces, candles on a dinner table, fire pits in the backyard. Something about a living flame draws us in and holds us there, makes us quieter, makes us more reflective, makes us want to talk and listen and be together. That response is not learned. It is ancient. It is wired into us by hundreds of thousands of years of sitting around fires exactly like the ones our mother tended. The fire was the first technology, and it shaped everything that came after. It gave us cooked food, which gave us more calories, which fed our growing brains. It gave us warmth, which let us survive in climates that would otherwise have killed us. It gave us light, which extended the day and created a time for social bonding and knowledge transfer that did not exist before. It gave us protection from predators. And it gave us a gathering place, a centre, a home. Every human community that has ever existed has had some version of a central fire, some gathering place where people come together to share food and stories and warmth and the simple comfort of not being alone. And it started with people like her, with Neanderthals crouching over coals in limestone caves, breathing gently on embers, coaxing life from fire the way they coaxed life from everything, with patience and skill and an unshakable refusal to give up. There is also something worth saying about the Neanderthal relationship with the animals they shared their world with. We have talked about hunting, about predators, about the practical relationship between Neanderthals and the Ice Age megafauna. But there might have been something more to it. At several sites, we find evidence that suggests Neanderthals paid particular attention to certain animals beyond what practical necessity would require. The eagle talons we discussed earlier are one example. The collection of raven feathers at some sites is another. Ravens and eagles are not good eating. They are not significant sources of hide or bone or sinew. But they are impressive. They are powerful. They fly, which must have seemed like magic to a ground-bound being. The collection and modification of their feathers and talons suggests a relationship that goes beyond the practical, into the symbolic, the aesthetic, the spiritual. Did Neanderthals have a spiritual relationship with animals? Did they feel kinship with the creatures they hunted? Did they tell stories about the great cave bear or the woolly mammoth the way later human cultures told stories about the eagle and the wolf? We cannot know for certain, but the evidence nudges us in that direction, and it makes sense if you think about it. When you share your world with animals of such power and majesty, when your survival depends on understanding their behaviour with intimate precision, when you eat their flesh and wear their skins and make your tools from their bones, a kind of relationship forms that goes deeper than mere utility. You know them, you respect them, you might even revere them, and when you take their life to feed your family, you might feel something about it. Something that is not quite guilt and not quite gratitude, but some ancient precursor to both. The cave where our mother lived is still there, probably. Limestone endures. The rock shelter that housed her family for generations is somewhere in the Dordogne Valley, its entrance perhaps overgrown now, its floor layered with thousands of years of sediment that buried her tools, her fires, her very bones, deeper and deeper under the weight of time. But the valley is still there, the river still flows, the hills still roll down to the floodplain where the deer once grazed, and where now, perhaps, there are vineyards and stone farmhouses. But here is something to hold on to as we enter the final part of this story. Everything she did, every fire she lit, every child she carried, every wound she survived, left a mark that did not disappear when she died. And what that mark looks like, well, that is where this story becomes about you. Roads that carry cars and trucks instead of hunting parties. The world has changed beyond anything she could have imagined. And yet, if she could stand at the mouth of her cave today, if she could somehow see through the 60,000 years that separate her time from ours, she would recognize the river, the shape of the valley, the limestone cliffs, the way the light falls on the hillside in the morning. The bones of the landscape are the same, only the flesh has changed, and she would recognize something else too. She would recognize us. Not physically, perhaps. We are taller than her people, thinner, differently proportioned. Our faces are flatter, our brows smoother, our chins more prominent. We look different. But if she could see past the surface, if she could watch us for a day the way we have watched her, she would see something familiar in everything we do. She would see mothers holding their children. She would see elders teaching the young. She would see people gathering around warmth and light in the evening, talking, laughing, sharing the events of the day. She would see tools being made and food being prepared and injuries being tended. She would see grief when someone dies and joy when someone is born and the quiet, steady rhythm of daily life that is the same in every human community that has ever existed. She would recognize us because we are her. We are the continuation of the story she started. We are the fire she kept burning, still burning, still throwing its light against the darkness. And if somehow, impossibly, she could reach across that abyss of time and touch your hand, you would feel the same warmth in her skin that you feel in your own, the same blood heat, the same living pulse, and her grip would be stronger than yours because her world demanded strength in ways that ours no longer does. But the hand itself, the 5 fingers, the opposable thumb, the lines on the palm, those would be the same. Human hands, made for making, made for holding, made for reaching out to each other across the distance, and her eyes, if you looked into her eyes, you would see something you recognize. Not the same color maybe, not the same shape, but the same depth, the same awareness, the same light of consciousness looking back at you, the light that says, I am here, I am alive, I am someone, the same light that burns in every human eye that has ever opened on this world. We are separated from her by 60,000 years and a species boundary and the extinction of her entire people, and still, if you looked into her eyes, you would know her. You would know her because she is the beginning of you. Because the story of her life and the story of your life are the same story, told in different settings, with different characters, but with the same themes: love, survival, loss, hope, the endless struggle to keep the people we care about safe and warm and fed and alive for one more day. That is the whole story. That is the only story. And it has been the same since the first human heartbeat, in the first human chest, in the first human dawn. And some things have not changed at all. Somewhere tonight, a mother is lying next to her children, watching them sleep, feeling that same impossible weight of love and terror and determination. Somewhere tonight, someone is tending a fire, even if it is a gas stove or a furnace thermostat, keeping the cold at bay, keeping the darkness out. Somewhere tonight, an old person is telling stories to young people who are only half listening, passing on knowledge that they do not yet know they need. Somewhere tonight, 2 friends are sitting together in comfortable silence, the way the mother and the other women in her group sat together by the fire, needing no words, the presence itself being enough. Somewhere tonight, a child is sick and a parent is sitting beside them, hand on forehead, counting breaths, doing exactly what the mother did when her children were sick, exactly what Neanderthal parents did for 300,000 years, which is stay close and not leave and pour every ounce of love and worry and will into the simple act of being there. Somewhere tonight, someone is making something with their hands, shaping raw material into something useful or beautiful, feeling the same satisfaction that she felt when a flint flake came off just right. The ancient pleasure of creation, of turning nothing into something, and somewhere tonight, you are lying in the dark, your mind slowing down, your body growing heavy, your eyes closing, and you are connected to all of it. To her, to her children, to the fire and the cave and the long, unbroken chain of survival that stretches from her time to yours. You are here because she was there. You are alive because she fought to live. You carry her strength in your bones and her resilience in your blood and her legacy in every cell of your body. There is a concept in philosophy called the long now, the idea that the present moment is not just this second, this minute, this hour, but extends backward and forward through vast stretches of time. When you lie in bed at night and feel your heartbeat, that rhythm is the long now. It is the same rhythm that beat in her chest 60,000 years ago. The same blood, more or less. The same muscle. The same ancient electrical impulse telling the same ancient organ to keep going, keep pumping, keep living. And when you breathe, the air fills your lungs the same way it filled hers. Different air, different atmosphere, different levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide, but the same fundamental act. And if you're still here, still listening, still drifting somewhere between waking and sleep, then stay just a little longer, because what comes next is the quietest and most beautiful part of this whole story. The expansion, the contraction, the in and the out, the taking in of the world and the letting go. She breathed like this. You breathe like this. Your children will breathe like this, and their children, and theirs. It never stops. The chain of breath stretches from her to you without a single break, because every link in that chain is someone who breathed, someone who lived, someone who cared enough about the future to bring the next generation into being and keep them alive long enough to do the same. You are the result of an unbroken 60,000-year relay race of survival. Every ancestor between her and you survived long enough to have children. Not one of them failed. Not one of them gave up. Through ice ages and famines and plagues and wars and every disaster that the world could throw at them, they kept going. And here you are, the latest runner, holding the baton, still going, still breathing, still here. That is not nothing. That is everything. You are the proof that she succeeded. You are the answer to every cold night she endured, every dangerous hunt she survived, every wound she tended, and every fire she coaxed back to life from dying embers. Every generation between her and you is proof that she succeeded. The fact that you exist at all, that you are lying here right now listening to this story, means that every single one of your ancestors did what she did. They kept going. They kept the fire burning. They kept the children safe. They kept each other alive for 60,000 years, without interruption, without failure, without a single break in the chain. And you are the continuation. You are the next chapter. You are the living, breathing proof that her life mattered, that her struggle was worth it, that the fire she tended so carefully all those years ago was not tended in vain. And the beautiful thing, the really beautiful thing, is that you do not have to do anything special to honour that legacy. You do not have to climb mountains or slay dragons or conquer nations. You just have to do what she did. Get through the day, take care of the people around you, keep the fire burning, pass on what you know. And when the night comes, when the darkness settles and the world grows quiet, let yourself rest. Let yourself sleep. Let yourself surrender to the ancient rhythm of waking and sleeping that has carried every human life from its first breath to its last. Because rest is not weakness. Rest is what she fought for. Rest is the reward that she earned every single day, and that you earn too, in your own way, in your own time, in your own version of the same old beautiful struggle. So rest now. Let the story end the way all the best stories end, with quiet and warmth and the promise of morning. You know, I started researching this story months ago, and the thing that stuck with me more than anything else was not the hunting, or the tools, or even the DNA. It was the care. It was the simple, stubborn, relentless Neanderthal refusal to leave anyone behind. The one-armed man who was kept alive for decades. The blind, limping elder who survived to old age. The sick who were nursed. The injured who were healed. The dead who were buried with tenderness. That is what I keep coming back to. That is what I think about when I lie in bed at night and try to make sense of the world. The fact that 60,000 years ago, in conditions that would have justified any amount of selfishness, these people chose compassion. They chose community. They chose each other. And we are still choosing. Every day, in 1,000 small ways, we are still choosing each other. And that, more than anything, is what connects us to them. Not the DNA, though that is real. Not the tools, though those are impressive. The connection is the choice. The choice to care. The choice to stay. The choice to keep the fire burning for everyone, not just yourself. That is the Neanderthal legacy, and it is the best thing about us. If this helped you wind down tonight, maybe subscribe before you drift off. That way the next story is waiting for you whenever you need it. Sleep well. The fire in the cave has burned down to embers now. The children are asleep. The old ones are resting. Outside, the stars are scattered across a sky unpolluted by any artificial light. More stars than you have ever seen. A river of light stretching from horizon to horizon. The mammoths in the valley are quiet. The wolves have found their dens. Even the wind has settled. And in the cave, in the warmth, in the dark, a family breathes together. The way they have breathed together for 300,000 years. The way their descendants, our ancestors, will continue to breathe together for thousands of generations to come. 60,000 years from now, someone will lie in bed and listen to a story about them, and wonder what it was like, and feel, perhaps, a flicker of connection across all that impossible distance of time. That someone is you, and that connection is real. Sleep well, descendant of survivors. Sleep well, carrier of ancient strength. Sleep well, and know that you come from people who faced the ice, and the dark and the danger, and who never ever stopped caring for each other. The fire is warm, the night is long. Let yourself rest now. You have earned it, just like she did. Good night. And as your eyes grow heavy, as the last waking thoughts begin to blur and soften, consider this. Every moments of caring for the injured and the elderly and the young, not because it was efficient, but because it was right. She knew that. Not in words, maybe. Not in any way she could have articulated, but in her bones, in her actions, in the way she lived every single day of her short, hard, extraordinary life. She knew that caring for each other was the whole point, and we still know it, even now, even after 60,000 years, we still know it. That is her legacy. Not the tools, though those were remarkable. Not the hunts, though those were brave. Not even the DNA, though that is literally inside you right now. Her legacy is the simple, revolutionary, eternal idea that we are responsible for each other, that we survive together or not at all, that the fire is for everyone. Rest now. Let the story settle over you like a blanket. Let the images of cave and fire and family fade into the warm darkness of sleep. You are safe. You are warm. You are home, just like she was, just like she always tried to be. The cave is quiet now. The fire breathes. The stars turn slowly overhead, the same stars she watched, the same sky, the same ancient light travelling from the same distant suns. Nothing has changed, and everything has changed, and in this moment, in the space between waking and sleeping, the distance between her time and yours feels very, very small. Good night. Sleep well. And in your dreams, if you dream at all, maybe you will see the cave. Maybe you will feel the warmth of the fire. Maybe you will hear the sound of a mother humming to her children in the dark, a sound so old it does not have a name, a sound that means everything is all right, everything is safe, everything can wait until morning. Let it carry you. Let it hold you. Let it take you down into the deep, warm, dreamless dark where the body heals and the mind rests, and the world outside stops asking anything of you at all. She is there somewhere, in that darkness. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as something older and more fundamental than either. As the beginning of the story that you are the latest chapter of. As the first warmth. As the first care. As the first love that made everything else possible. And she would want you to sleep now. She would want you to rest. She would want you to close your eyes and let go and trust that the fire will still be burning in the morning, that the people you love will still be there, that the world, for all its dangers, is a place worth waking up to. So close your eyes. Breathe slowly. Let the weight of the day fall away from you like a heavy fur slipping off your shoulders. Feel the warmth around you. Feel the safety of your bed, your room, your home. Feel the connection to every person who has ever slept under the stars and woken to face another day. You are part of something ancient and ongoing and beautiful. You are the fire that she kept burning. You are the child she kept safe. You are the story that she started and that will never ever end. Sleep now. The cave is warm. The fire is bright, and somewhere, across all the distance of time, a Neanderthal mother is holding her children and watching the flames, and knowing with absolute certainty that tomorrow will come, and it did, and it does, and it will. Good night.